الردة وأقسامها المجمع عليها. Apostasy and its categories that are agreed upon. He says, الردة تنقسم إلى ثلاثة أقسام. Apostasy divides into three categories: أفعال وأقوال واعتقادات. Actions, sayings, and convictions. كما اتفق على ذلك أهل المذاهب الأربعة, just as the people of the four schools have agreed upon. الشافعية والحنفية والمالكية والحنابلة. Shafi'is, the Hanafis, the Malikis, and the Hanbalis. ومما استدل به أهل الحق على أن الكفر ثلاثة أقسام, and amongst what the people of the truth have used as evidence that blasphemy is of three divisions is ayat, verses of the Quran. Minha qawluhu ta'ala, amongst them is the saying of God Almighty, يحلفون بالله ما قالوا ولقد قالوا كلمة الكفر وكفروا بعد إسلامهم. They swear to God that they did not say it, and by God they said the word of kufr, and they blasphemed after their display of Islam. That's the 74th ayah of Surah At-Tawbah. فهذه الآية يفهم منها أن الكفر منه قولي. And so this verse, it is understood from it that some blasphemy is verbal. وقوله تعالى, and the saying of God Almighty, إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا. Merely the believers are those who believe in Allah and His Messenger. Then they have no doubts. That's the 15th ayah of Surah Al-Hujurat. فهذه الآية يفهم منها أن الكفر منه اعتقادي. أن الكفر منه اعتقادي. And so this verse, it is understood from it that some blasphemy is due to conviction. لأن الارتياب أي الشك يكون بالقلب, because uncertainty, meaning doubt, is in the heart. وقوله تعالى, and the saying of God Almighty, لا تسجدوا للشمس ولا للقمر. Do not prostrate to the sun nor to the moon. That's the 37th verse of Surah Fussilat. يفهم منه أن الكفر منه فعلي. It is understood from this verse that some blasphemy is by action. وهذه المسألة إجماعية. This case is a case of consensus. اتفق عليها علماء المذاهب الأربعة. The scholars of the four schools have agreed to it. وكل من الثلاثة كفر بمفرده. And each of these three types of blasphemy is blasphemy individually. فالكفر القولي كفر. Therefore, verbalized blasphemy is blasphemy. ولو لم يقترن به اعتقاد ولا فعل, even if it were not associated with a conviction or an action. والكفر الفعلي كفر, and enacted blasphemy, performed actions of blasphemy, is blasphemy. ولو لم يقترن به اعتقاد وانشراح الصدر به ولا قول, even if it were not associated with conviction or reception of the heart about it, nor a statement. والكفر الاعتقادي كفر, and blasphemous conviction is blasphemy. وَلَوْ لَمْ يَقْتَرِنْ بِهِ قَوْلٌ وَلَا فِعْلٌ, even if it were not affiliated or associated with or accompanied by a statement nor an action. وإنما يشترط للقول الكفري انشراح الصدر في المكره على قول الكفر, and merely acceptance of the heart in terms of blasphemous words is only a condition for who's compelled, coerced, forced على قول الكفر, the one who was forced to say the word of blasphemy, بالقتل ونحوه, forced by a death threat, يعني, yes, and the like, مما يفضي إلى الموت, and the likes of what leads to death, such as having the arms and legs cut off. And some scholars don't say and the like, they just say under the threat of death. Sheikh says under the threat of death and the like. Some scholars don't say and the like. And what's the like? The like is what leads to death, such as having the arms and legs cut off. فالمكره هو الذي لا يكفر لمجرد القول بعد أن أكره إلا أن يشرح صدره بما يقوله. And so it is the compelled one who does not blaspheme for merely uttering blasphemy after being compelled, unless he makes his chest receptive to that blasphemy, unless he makes his chest receptive to what he said. So what does Sheikh say here? Very straightforward statement. The compelled one is the one who does not blaspheme for merely saying blasphemy after being forced. So what does that mean? It means the one who's not compelled will commit blasphemy for merely saying blasphemy. It's the compelled one who does not commit blasphemy for merely saying blasphemy. Because when that compelled one hates the kufr in his heart, then he's merely saying it. He's just merely saying it. He doesn't believe in it. And he wouldn't be merely saying it had he not been compelled. So it's the compelled one who does not blaspheme for merely saying blasphemy after being compelled. He would only blaspheme had he made his chest receptive to what he said. فعندئذ يكفر, then he would blaspheme. لأن المسلم المكره على قول الكفر إن قال كلمة الكفر لإنقاذ نفسه مما هدده به الكفار, because the compelled Muslim, because the Muslim compelled to say a word of blasphemy, if he said the word of blasphemy to save himself from what the kuffar threatened him with, وقلبه غير منشرح بما يقوله, and his heart is not pleased with what he is saying, فلا يحكم بكفره, then he would not be judged as a blasphemer. وأما إن تغير خاطره بعد الإكراه, but if his thoughts about it after being forced changed, فشرح صدره بقول الكفر, and then he made his chest receptive to the saying of blasphemy, kafar, then he blasphemed. وَهَذَا مَعْنَى قَوْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى, this is the meaning of the saying of Allah. Exalted is He, مَنْ كَفَرَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ إِيمَانِهِ إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ ولكن من شرح بالكفر صدرا فعليهم غضب من الله ولهم عذاب عظيم. Whoever disbelieved in Allah after his display of faith, except who was compelled while his heart was tranquil with faith, but concerning who was receptive of the blasphemy in his chest, then they deserve the torture of Allah. فَعَلَيْهِمْ غَضَبٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ, and a great torture is theirs. That's the 106th verse of Surah An-Nahl, the bee. فألغى هذا الحكم الشرعي الذي اتفق عليه علماء الإسلام وجاءت به هذه الآية أشخاص من أهل هذا العصر. And so some people from this time have voided this religious judgment upon which the scholars of Islam have agreed and with which this verse of the Quran has come. أحدهم سيد سابق في كتابه فقه السنة or فقه السنة. One of them is Sayyid Sabiq in his book Fiqh al-Sunnah. He said the wrong judgment here about this case, which is they're saying you don't leave Islam without intending to leave Islam. If you didn't mean to go out of Islam, you wouldn't go out. Wa Hassan Qaturji, and Hassan Qaturji, Lebanese man. Wa Shakhsun Suri min Ali al-Idlibi, and a Syrian person from the Idlibi family. فَلْيُحْذَرْ هَؤُلَاء, so let there be warning from those. فَهَؤُلَاءِ حَرَّفُوا شَرْعَ اللَّهِ, they have perverted the law of God. وَخَالَفُوا حُكَّامَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and they have gone against the Muslim rulers. مِنَ الْخُلَفَاءِ وَنُوَّابِهِمْ, the caliphs who were implementing the rules properly, and their appointees. These people of our day have gone against the practice and the understanding of the caliphs. فإنهم لم يكونوا يقولون الشخص الذي تكلم بكلمة الكفر والردة عند تقديمه إليهم للحكم عليه, because they didn't used to say to a person who said a word of blasphemy and apostasy and then was brought forward to them for judgment. هل كنت شارحا صدرك بما قلت من قول الكفر? Were you accepting of what you said of blasphemy? They didn't used to say that to someone who was charged with kufr and then brought forward to them. They didn't say, did you like the blasphemy you said? بل كانوا يجرون عليه حكم الردة. Rather, they used to apply the rule of apostasy to such a person. بمجرد اعترافه أو شهادة شاهدين عليه. By his mere confession that he did the blasphemy, or by the testimony of two witnesses about it. بأنه قال كلمة كذا من الكفر. Those witnesses would testify that he said such and such blasphemy. وهذه كتب التواريخ الإسلامية تشهد بذلك. And these books of Islamic history testify to that. في الوقائع التي ذكرت فيها. They testify to that in the incidents that are mentioned in those history books. كواقعة قتل الحلاج, like the incident of Hallaj's execution. فإنه أصدر عليه حكم الردة. For indeed, the judgment of apostasy was pronounced on him. لقوله أنا الحق, because he said, and Allah, he said, I am God. وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ مِنْ كَلِمَاتِ الرِّدَّةِ, and he said the likes of that, of other words of apostasy. فَأَصْدَرَ الْقَاضِي أبو عمر المالكي في بغداد أيام الخليفة المقتدر بالله حكما عليه. And so Judge Abu Umar the Maliki in Baghdad, in the days of Caliph al-Muqtadir Billah, he gave a verdict against al-Hallaj, the verdict of apostasy, that he was an apostate. فَقُطِعَتْ يَدَاهُ وَرِجْلَاهُ, so his hands and feet were amputated. ثُمَّ قُطِعَتْ رَقَبَتُهُ, and then he was beheaded. ثُمَّ أُحْرِقَتْ جُثَّتُهُ, and then he was cremated. ثُمَّ ضُرَّ رَمَادُهُ فِي دِجْلَةٍ, and then his ashes were thrown into the Tigris River. وَهَذَا التَّشْدِيدُ عَلَيْهِ لِيَرْتَدِعَ أَتْبَاعُهُ, and this severe treatment against him was to frighten his followers. لأنه كان له أتباع, because he had followers. عُرِفُوا بِالْحَلَّاجِيَّةِ, they were known as the Hallajis. وكان الإمام الجنيد رضي الله عنه سيد الطائفة الصوفية تفرس فيه بما آل إليه أمره. And Imam al-Junaid, may Allah accept his deeds, the sire of the Sufi party, he had a premonition about Hallaj's fate. لأنه قال للحلاج, because he said to al-Hallaj, لقد فتحت في الإسلام ثغرة لا يسدها إلا رأسك. You have opened in Islam a hole that shall not be filled by anything but your head. And then he wound up getting decapitated. So Al-Junaid's premonition came true. وجهلة المتصوفة خالفوا سيد الصوفية الجنيد. And the ignorant Sufi, pseudo-Sufis, the fake Sufis, they went against the sire of the Sufis, Al-Junaid. فصاروا يهونون أمر النطق بكلمات الردة ممن ينتسب إلى التصوف. And so they began to be negligent about the matter of pronouncing a word of apostasy concerning anyone who is attributed to Sufism. فَلَا يُكَفِّرُونَ أَحَدًا مِّنْهُمْ, so they became not deeming as a blasphemer any one of them. Yani anyone who's supposed to be a Sufi, and then he says the word of blasphemy, those fake Sufis will not deem him as a blasphemer. بِقَوْلِ أَنَا اللَّهُ or أَنَا الْحَقُّ, like even if he were to say, I'm God, أو قال إن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم يعلم جميع ما يعلمه الله, or if he said that the messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم knows all that Allah knows, أو إن الله يحل في الأشخاص, or even if he were to say that Allah dwells inside people, أو إن الله كان واحدا ثم صار كثيرا, or if he were to say that Allah was one but then he multiplied, فيزعمون أن العالم أجزاء من الله, and so they therefore claim that the world itself is parts of God. If a person said any of that, they would not deem him as a kafir. أما الصوفية الحقيقيون فهم بريئون منهم. As for the real Sufis, they are innocent of those people. Yani, they have nothing to do with them. فهؤلاء في واد وأولئك في واد آخر. Those are in one valley and those others are in a completely different valley. بل قال الإمام الجنيد رضي الله عنه. In fact, Imam al-Junaid said, may Allah accept his deeds, لو كنت حاكما, had I been ruler, لضربت عنق من سمعته يقول لا موجود إلا الله. I would behead anyone that I heard saying that nothing exists but God. That's a statement of blasphemy, saying nothing exists but God. That's blasphemy. Some people might think that means, though, God has power over everything. But that would be ignorance to think that that statement means that. If someone thought that that's what it means, then we're not going to judge him as a blasphemer. But we're going to forbid him from saying that, and we'll teach him that this doesn't mean that. وَمِنْ شَأْنِ هَؤُلَاءِ, and the case of those, أعني جهلة المتصوفة, I mean the ignorant fake Sufis, أن يقولوا إذا نقل عن أحدهم كلمة كفر, is that if a word of blasphemy were reported about any one of them, they would say, يؤول, this statement needs to be explained properly. It has an interpretation. وَلَوْ كَانَتْ مِمَّا لَا يَقْبَلُ التَّأْوِيلِ, they would say that even if that statement was something that has no other alternative interpretation, has no other way of interpretation. وَهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ أَبْعَدِ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ عَنْ عِلْمِ الدِّينِ, and those are the furthest of God's creation from the knowledge of the religion. فإن علماء الإسلام متفقون على أن التأويل البعيد لا يقبل. For indeed, the scholars of Islam are in agreement that far-fetched explanation of a blasphemous statement is unacceptable. Like what? Like if someone said, damn the messenger of God. And then you said to him, that's kufr. And then he says, no, I meant the scorpion. I meant the scorpion. Doesn't Allah send the scorpion? Or he says, no, I meant the lightning bolt. Doesn't Allah send the lightning bolt? So that explanation of his statement is not accepted. It's unacceptable. That's a far-fetched explanation. تأويل بعيد. إنما التأويل يقبل إذا كان قريبا. The alternative interpretation of an apparently blasphemous statement is only acceptable when that interpretation, that alternative interpretation, is feasible. قال ذلك الإمام الكبير حبيب بن ربيع المالكي. The big Imam, Habib, son of Rabi', the Maliki, said so. وإمام الحرمين, and Imam al-Haramain, al-Shafi'i, the Shafi'i scholar, he also said so. وَالشَّيْخُ الْإِمَامُ تَقِيُّ الدِّينِ السُّبْكِي, and also the Shaykh and the Imam Taqiyuddin as-Subki. ونقل معنى هذا عن الإمام محمد بن الحسن الشيباني صاحب أبي حنيفة. And this meaning was reported from Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, companion of Abu Hanifa. Question: is it the same if one is compelled by the threat of death to commit an action of kufr? Yes. وإنما نريد لتأييد كلامنا بعض نصوص أهل المذاهب الأربعة. And we shall now produce, in support of our discourse, some documents from the people of the four schools. Yes. Yani, the question was clear. I think the answer was clear, Yani. Okay, barakallahu feek. قال ابن حجر الهيتمي الشافعي ما نصه. Said Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, the Shafi'i, quote, ثم كفر المسلم أي قطعه للإسلام إما أن يكون بنية بالقلب إما أن يكون بنية بالقلب حالا أو مآلا. He says, furthermore, a Muslim's committing blasphemy, meaning his interrupting Islam, would either be by an intention in the heart, a present intention, or a decision for the future to blaspheme. وإن قصد الكفر وغيره على السواء. يعني whether he intended blasphemy or he didn't intend to commit blasphemy, he will still commit blasphemy. وكذا إن تردد بأن جرى شك ينافي الجزم بالنية. And also, one would blaspheme. This is the words of Ibn Hajar al-Haytami. He said, also, one would blaspheme if he were indecisive by there happening to him a doubt that negates certainty in his intention, yani in his steadfastness to the religion. Yani, in simple words, he's saying, also, if he doubts about being a Muslim or he doubts about Islam, he blasphemes. ولا تأثير لما يجري في الفكر من غير اختيار. Al-Haytami says, and what crosses the mind without will, without choice, the involuntary thought has no effect. It's not going to be blasphemy on you. If blasphemy merely crossed your mind, you're not going to be committing blasphemy for that. So some people who have whispers, they need that. Just because it crossed your mind, it's not blasphemy. أو تعمد فعل ولو بقلبه استهزاء أو جحودا. Apostasy will also happen if someone intentionally did something, even only in his heart. If he did that out of sacrilege, yani disrespect, or he did it out of denial, stubbornness, in other words, obstinacy, obstinate denial, end quote. وقال النووي في روضة الطالبين ما نصه. And Nawawi said in Rawdatul Talibin, quote, الردة apostasy وهي قطع الإسلام. It is interrupting Islam. ويحصل ذلك تارة بالقول الذي هو كفر. That sometimes happens by a statement which is blasphemy. وتارة بالفعل, and it sometimes happens by an action. وتحصل الردة بالقول الذي هو كفر سواء صدر عن اعتقاد أو عناد أو استهزاء. And apostasy happens by a statement, which is blasphemy, whether that statement came forth with conviction or that statement was a statement of obstinacy or it were a statement of sacrilege, meaning disrespect. Intaha. Those are Shafi'is. وفي كتاب مواهب الجليل للحطاب المالكي ما نصه. And in the book Mawahib al-Jalil by Al-Hattab the Maliki, ما نصه, quote, الردة كفر المسلم بصريح لفظ يقتضيه أو فعل يتضمنه. انتهى. He says apostasy is a Muslim's committing blasphemy. Apostasy is a Muslim's committing blasphemy by an explicit expression that dictates blasphemy or by an action that is inclusive of blasphemy. End quote. Here he says by an explicit expression. Now we know from what we've learned that blasphemy doesn't have to be explicit. Could be implicit or apparent. The statement itself could seem to be blasphemy. The statement itself could seem to be blasphemy while possibly having other meanings. So if he meant the blasphemous meaning when he did that, then he blasphemes. Here, this Maliki scholar, he says, apostasy is a Muslim's committing blasphemy by an explicit expression. So it's possible here that he means from the other person's perspective, from the perspective of the one who's hearing that. Because if you hear someone say what seems to be blasphemy, and you don't know that he meant the blasphemy, it's not permissible for you to deem him as a blasphemer. But if you hear him say explicit blasphemy, then you may judge him as a blasphemer. Otherwise, Allahu A'lam, I don't know why he said sarih there. That may be that I offered for you. That's from based on what I've learned. Because the scholars, they said, some of them said that anything that is surely kufr is deemed as kufr. And anything that's not surely kufr is not deemed as kufr. That's what some scholars said. They said anything that's surely kufr is deemed as kufr, and anything that's not surely kufr is not deemed as kufr. That statement, that's for the judge. That statement is for the judge. Yani, that means the one who's encountering that from the other. So maybe this is what he's talking about here when he says, apostasy is a Muslim's committing blasphemy by an explicit expression, because he means something that's surely kufr. So then you're going to deem it as kufr. Wallahu a'lam. وفي منح الجليل للشيخ محمد عليش المالكي. And in the book Minah al-Jalil by Sheikh Muhammad Illaysh the Maliki, ما نصه, quote, وسواء كفر أي المرتد بقول صريح في الكفر كقوله كفرت بالله أو برسول الله أو بالقرآن. He says, whether the blasphemy, so we're quoting him here, he says within his statement, whether the blasphemy or whether he blasphemed, kafara, sawa'un kafara, whether he blasphemed, meaning the apostate, by an explicit statement of blasphemy. An explicit statement of blasphemy is like to say, I disbelieve in Allah, or I disbelieve in the messenger of Allah, or in the Quran, or ilahu thnan, or thalatha, or to say God is two or three. That's explicit blasphemy. Or Uzayr ibn Allah, or to say Uzayr is the son of God. أو بلفظ يقتضيه أي يستلزم اللفظ للكفر استلزاما بينا. Or if he were to say a statement that clearly leads to blasphemy, it clearly leads to blasphemy. Its implication is clear blasphemy. كجحد مشروعية شيء مجمع عليه معلوم من الدين بالضرورة. Like what? Like denying something that's sanctioned in the sacred law, and it's agreed about, and it's known in the religion by necessity. The very important statement here is معلوم من الدين بالضرورة. Known in the religion by necessity, that means it's common religious knowledge. The laymen know it like the scholars know it. All the Muslims know it. It's known in the religion by necessity, common religious knowledge. Mujma'un alayhi. And it's a matter of consensus. That means it's correct also. There's no room for error in this position. So correct judgment that's common religious knowledge is what we're talking about here. Definitively correct judgment, definitively correct. Not maybe correct. For sure correct judgment, because it's a case of consensus. And it's not only known to the scholars, it's known also to the laymen like it's known to the scholars. So then it is common religious knowledge. فَإِنَّهُ يَسْتَلْزِمُ تَكْذِيبَ الْقُرْآنِ أَوِ الرَّسُولِ. Then such a denial of this sanctioned thing, when he says such and such is not part of the religion, for example, this statement, if he says such and such is not part of the religion, this statement here. So is that a clear kufr? That depends on what it implies. So if it implies kufr, then it's a kufr. If it clearly implies kufr, then it's kufr. What clearly implies kufr? This is what I just told you. Denying something that's consensus and known in the religion by necessity. What's the clear implication? The clear implication is contradicting the Quran or the messenger. Why are we calling this an implication? Because the one who denies this issue, he might say to you, I'm not contradicting the Quran. I'm not contradicting the messenger. I'm just saying that this is not part of the religion. So when his denial of something leads to clearly contradicting the Quran or contradicting the messenger, then that's blasphemy. وكاعتقاد جسمية الله أو تحيزه. And likewise, believing in bodifying God or God being contained. انتهى. End quote. وقال الفقيه ابن عابدين الحنفي في رد المحتار على الدر المختار ما نصه. And Ibn Abidin, the Hanafi, said in Radd al-Muhtar, quote, قوله وركنها إجراء كلمة الكفر على اللسان هذا بالنسبة إلى الظاهر الذي يحكم به الحاكم وإلا فقد تكون بدونه كما لو عرض له اعتقاد باطل أو نوى أن يكفر بعد حين. So this Hanafi, he said, he's explaining the words of an author. So he says, when the author said the integral of blasphemy or apostasy is to make the word of blasphemy run on the tongue. And this is concerning what appears, that by which the ruler judges. Yeah, and he's saying, I'm talking right now about an outward display of blasphemy for which a ruler could judge a person as a kafir. وَإِلَّا فَقَدْ تَكُونُ بِدُونِهِ. Or else, blasphemy or apostasy could also be, apostasy يعني, الردة قد تكون هي بدونه. Apostasy could happen by less than that. It doesn't have to be displayed outwardly for apostasy to take place. كما لو عرض له اعتقاد باطل, like if a person took on an invalid conviction, one that's definitely blasphemy. Or if he intended to blaspheme after a while, meaning he decided that he will blaspheme later. As we know, he blasphemes now. انتهى. End quote. وقال تاج الدين السبكي في طبقاته ما نصه. And Tajuddin as-Subki, he's a Shafi'i, he said in his Tabaqat, quote, وَلَا خِلَافَ عِنْدَ الْأَشْعَرِيِّ وَأَصْحَابِهِ. There is no difference to Al-Ash'ari and his colleagues. بَلْ وَسَائِرِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. In fact, even between all the rest of the Muslims. أَنَّ مَنْ تَلَفَّظَ بِالْكُفْرِ أَوْ فَعَلَ أَفْعَالَ الْكُفْرِ. That anyone who pronounced blasphemy or did the actions of blasphemy, أنه كافر بالله العظيم, that this one is a disbeliever in God the Great, مخلد في النار, staying in hell immortally in torture, وإن عرف بقلبه, even if he knows the truth in his heart, he's still a kafir. انتهى. End quote. وفي شرح منتهى الإرادات للبهوتي الحنبلي ما نصه. And in the explanation of Muntaha al-Iradat by al-Buhuti, the Hanbali, quote, Babu Hukm al-Murtad, chapter about the judgment of the apostate. وهو لغة الراجع. The linguistic meaning of murtad is someone who goes back, someone who returns. قال تعالى, Allah, exalted is He, said, ولا ترتدوا على أدباركم فتنقلبوا خاسرين. Don't turn back on your heels and then go back as losers, O Israelites. Go forward and fight. So it's giving linguistic meaning. That's the 21st ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah. وَالشَّرْعًا مَنْ كَفَرَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مُمَيِّزًا بنطق أو اعتقاد أو فعل أو شك طوعا. He says, and religiously, he's the one who committed blasphemy. He's going to say here, Ba'da Islamihi, after his Islam, he separated it. It looks like his statement's going to be deficient, but he filled it. Apostasy is for a Muslim to go out of Islam. So what did he say here? I'm just going to follow his words. Religiously, it's the one who committed blasphemy. وَلَوْ كَانَ مُمَيِّزًا, even if this one were a child who reached mental discerning. That's what this Hanbali said. Blasphemy by a pronunciation or a conviction or an action or a doubt with volition, intentionally. No one forced him. وَلَوْ كَانَ هَازِلًا, even if he were joking. بَعْدَ إِسْلَامِهِ, after his Islam. يعني مَنْ كَفَرَ بَعْدَ إِسْلَامِهِ, the apostate is the one who blasphemed after his Islam. Intaha. Sheikh says here, فيتبين لك مما ذكرنا أن المذاهب الأربعة متفقة على هذا التقسيم. And so it became clear for you from what we have mentioned that the four schools are in agreement about this division. أي تقسيم الكفر إلى أنواعه الثلاثة, meaning dividing blasphemy to its three divisions. الكفر القولي والكفر الفعلي والكفر الاعتقادي والكفر الاعتقادي. Blasphemous saying, blasphemous action, and blasphemous conviction. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. We'll stop there for tonight.